Another edition of Back Porch Sports presented by Duck Club Bourbon. He's Ronnie Sanders. I'm Scott Hamilton. And for the next hour, we're going to take a lap around the Southeastern Conference, take a look ahead to football season, and talk about some legislation that might have a massive impact not only on the SEC, but all of college athletics. But right now, Ronnie, I want to give you a little reminder that there is a little more than 90 days left until the college football season. Can you make it?
Hard to believe, isn't it?
It's definitely flying by, man. It's definitely flying by. And I'll tell you what else flew by. The SEC spring meetings flew by. They happened last week at Miramar Beach, Destin, Florida. The usual get-together down there in the sun, just a big shindig where all the coaches and all the administrators and, of course, Greg Sankey, they get together and they talk about a lot of different things. One of the things that come out during the SEC spring meetings was the early kickoff times. Or the early season kickoff times, the first 3 weeks of the 2026 season, they released times. Really, really good schedule coming out of the gate. I'm tickled to death with it. A lot of non-conference games, but really solid non-conference matchups. But not everybody happy, Ronnie. Not everybody happy. You know who's not happy? Arkansas Athletic Director Hunter Yurachek. He's not happy at all. Did you see the statement he put out?
I did. Why don't you read it for our
I think I'll do that right now. Here is Hunter Yurachek, and this is what he had to say. I don't know if I should read it verbatim, if I should skip some parts. I want to make sure that the message is completely conveyed. So the schedule is released, the TV times rather, for the first few weeks of the regular season, and no sooner does it hit the internet, the Twitter sphere or whatever, than Hunter Yurachek has already got a release fired off. And I'm quoting verbatim. I am extremely concerned and displeased about the recently released kickoff times for our football program in consecutive weeks this September and the impact it will have on the well-being of our student athletes. And then he goes on to say ESPN has set our game at Utah for 9:15 p.m. Central Time on September 12th. We anticipate returning to campus at approximately 6 a.m. on Sunday, September 13th, followed by an 11 a.m. home kickoff against Georgia just 6 days later on September 19th. And this is where it starts getting juicy. Quote, this assigned schedule will cost our student athletes nearly a full day of rest and recovery that they would otherwise have available to them. This is not simply a competitive advantage. It is a genuine welfare issue for the young men who represent our program and contribute greatly to the bottom line of our television partners. This type of scheduling is, get ready, Ronnie, unacceptable and demonstrates a clear neglect for the well-being of college athletes. I am confident that there are not many other programs in the SEC that would be placed in a similar position, and I will not quietly accept it for our program. I have formally requested that the SEC office and ESPN aggressively pursue an alternative solution for one or both kickoff times during those consecutive weeks. The focus must be on the well-being of the game's participants, not the bottom line of our media partners. And again, that's Hunter Yurachek, Vice Chancellor and Director of Athletics at Arkansas. Ronnie, do you know what my response to that is? Play better.
Or don't schedule Utah. How about don't schedule Utah?
Play better or don't schedule Utah. Here's the bottom line. Arkansas, in 8 of the last 14 years, has won 4 games or less.
They're terrible.
They've been not great. And when you're not great, you usually get a crap kickoff time. That's how it works. And it's not because they kicked off at 11 a.m. against Notre Dame that the Irish beat them 56-13. Right. That's not the reason. First of all, good on Hunter Yurachek for doing what he's supposed to do. That's his football program. He has to step up and act like he's, oh, I can't believe I'm outraged. But actually, who's he fooling? I mean, is he really fooling anybody?
Well, he signed the contract to play Utah. And look, I mean, at the end of the day, you don't have to play. You don't have to play on the West Coast. You can play somebody on the East Coast. You can play Wake Forest. I mean, I have no sympathy for that. Just to be that's me.
That's you. Okay. Well, of course, Greg Sankey was asked about it at the end of the SEC spring meetings. He was asked the very question and what the conference was going to do. And here is how Greg Sankey responded.
Communicated the displeasure in advance. It hasn't changed. That's one of those points of authority that's given to our broadcast partner. And the squeeze on the West Coast game, we don't have to do what other colleague conferences do by comparison. And then the squeeze with an early kickoff is not something that I'm thrilled about either, but we do delegate that authority as part of our TV contracts.
Help me understand. What did he just say?
I'm not sure. I believe he put it off on the TV part.
I'm not sure either. That's what it sounded like to me, like he was passing the buck and they really couldn't do anything about it. How much? But ask yourself this: how many feathers is the SEC willing to ruffle in order to help Arkansas get a better kickoff time? It ain't Georgia, it ain't Alabama, it ain't Texas.
No, it's not even at this point. It's not even Florida and Auburn. I mean,
You're not wrong. You're not wrong, but I mean, they're not going to tick off the golden goose.
No.
Just for Arkansas's sake. It goes back to Arkansas winning 4 games or less in 8 of the last 14 years.
Get better. Yeah, get better kickoff times.
Yeah. Can't wait to see how this wraps up. We're talking about the SEC spring meetings, and those have completed. They're done. We thought we would get an answer for a 2014 playoff. We should have known better. I mean, that's not something that was going to be decided. That the Southeastern Conference official position of if they would pivot from 16 to 24, that's not something that would have been announced this week. That's going to happen during a Zoom call on a Friday. And Sankey was real quick to put that to bed. You're not going to get an answer on the college football playoff. Here's one thing that we did get an answer on, and I find it very interesting. The SEC mandating gambling education for all of its student athletes. These numbers were striking. SEC says about $12 billion with a B, dollars were wagered on games that had at least one SEC team involved in this one. And that includes $1 million in men's basketball and football. More than 400 SEC athletes also targeted by prop bets. Okay, my first thought is this, and I look forward to hearing your reaction. What took him so long? Gambling is not a new thing. It was legalized in 2018 where states were given the option to, if they wanted to have legal sports gambling in their states. Why is this just now becoming a thing at the conference level?
I'm not sure, but it's been pretty common. Even when I was involved in it, we did gambling education for our players. Now, maybe not to the extent that they're going to do it now, but I think most schools have been doing it and mandating it conference wide, make sure everybody does it. But my guess is that everybody, if not pretty well close to everybody's already doing it anyway.
Well, I can tell you why it's happening now. It's happening because of the Brendan Sorsby thing at Texas Tech.
Yeah.
It's a reactionary move by the Southeastern Conference instead of being proactive, and I find that extremely disappointing, but I don't know of any other conferences that are going to this extreme. They're going to actually hang posters in facilities talking about gambling, and they're putting in hotlines where you can rat people out if you see something suspicious. I like it. I have no problem with it. I think it should have already happened, but what concerns me are the prop bets where you can wager on individual performance or lack thereof. I think that's the thing that everybody still needs to figure out how to get their arms around, because I think it has the most potential to not only impact things on the fields of play and courts of play, but also you hear tales of athletes being contacted by wahoos and wackos and angry fans. That's dangerous, buddy. That's dangerous.
It's dangerous, and I'm not sure how you regulate that, but that's something that certainly needs to be regulated.
Well, there are a lot of things that need to be regulated, and you have set me up for a perfect segue into our next topic that we're going to discuss for the better part of the rest of the show. Some news out of Washington this week that we're going to also discuss with Chris Lowe of On3 Sports, absolutely fantastic veteran college football writer. Something called the Protect College Sports Act. Okay? and it's a bipartisan bill that's aimed at eventually becoming a law and hopefully perhaps helping college athletics get back on the right track. Here's the big word, Ronnie. Bipartisan. It's bipartisan. I think that gives me hope this thing might actually come to life as a law, but
bipartisan and Ted Cruz in the same sentence.
Well, miracles never cease. We're going to discuss the Protect College Sports Act. We're also going to get a little bit more into some happenings down at the spring meetings, the Southeastern Conference spring meetings later in the show. All that when Chris Lowe of On 3 joins us, probably in about 20 minutes. He's Ronnie Sanders. I'm Scott Hamilton. It's Back Porch Sports, presented by Duck Club Bourbon.
Good games, good friends, real stories. That's what Saturdays are all about on the Back Porch, proudly sponsored by Duck Club Bourbon.
Welcome back to Back Porch Sports, presented by Duck Club Bourbon. Chris Lowe of On 3 is going to join us on the Duncan Williams Asset Management Hotline in about 10 minutes. We'll get his take on some things that went down at Miramar Beach, Tony, Destin, Florida, during the SEC's annual spring meetings. And Ronnie, before we get into that, one of the topics I wanted to chop up with you is the Protect College Sports Act. We referenced it at the end of the last segment. We're going to dive a little deeper into it right now. I look at this thing as it currently lives, and I'm like, it's perfect. Me, for Joe fan, Joe journalist, I think it's absolutely wonderful. I see no flaws in it. I see it doesn't miss much. You've had an opportunity to get some eyeballs on this thing. I don't expect you to read all the 111 pages of it, but I think you've had a pretty good grasp of what's going on. What's your first impression about the Protect College Sports Act? It's
pretty comprehensive, and it's bipartisan. So I'm hopeful that it can get passed, but I think it would be a major improvement over what we're dealing with right now. It would set the framework for NIL and some antitrust protections for the schools. So I think it's a really good thing. Hopefully it passes.
Well, what I like is this, and some of it's just common sense, things we've been screaming about. One-time transfer for undergrads. Great. Sign me up. I love it. 5 years of eligibility. I think that's absolutely fantastic. It makes sense. I don't want 32-year-olds out trying to play ball. This one's called the Lane Kiffin rule. Can't hire another school's coach during the season. It also applies to assistant coaches. Think of the drama we could have avoided last football season at the tail end had that thing been in place then. The rest of it, though, I have some questions. First of all, I think it takes direct shot at Southeastern Conference in the Big Ten, and I'm going to tell you why. Section 205. This is what Section 205 of the Protect College Sports Act does. Again, 111 pages. Freezes mergers for leagues with $1 billion or more in 2025 revenue. How many leagues have that much revenue, Ronnie?
2.
2. How about that? The SEC and the Big Ten. Okay. So this is in place to keep the Super League from forming. If this happens, it'd be federal law. That means they cannot form any kind of marriage. Also this, Ronnie, allows pooling of media rights if 75% of the FBS agrees. Okay. Well, let me think. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe there are 9 FBS conferences. So if 7 of them agree, would that be 75%?
Pretty close.
So if say the 2 that make the most, SEC and Big Ten don't agree, they would still have 75.9%. Mm-hmm. So this is basically a bill created to reel in the power of the SEC and the Big 12. My impression, this thing was crafted by somebody in either the ACC or Big 12, more than likely the Big 12, and it was probably a certain super booster affiliated with Texas Tech, who happens to have a relationship with Ted Cruz.
Imagine that. And he's from Texas. I mean, he's, so. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting time in which we live. You look at the media environment, and you look at our politics, and you look at which we won't get into, but it's a wild time to be alive right now, Scott.
And that's what this thing gives me hope. And maybe I'm a little optimistic, maybe I'm naive or whatever, but I feel good about this if it can come to light, if it can make its way through the various channels it has to go through. I still think it has to have a certain type of process, right? And I didn't pay a lot of attention for the after school stuff for I'm a bill, I become a law. I remember the little cartoons, but I think they have hearings. Then it gets marked up in Senate, and then it has to get a Senate vote, and I think it has to get about 60 votes. They have a recess, if I'm not mistaken, come August.
I believe so.
So this probably won't hit the books for several months. And in the meantime, there's going to be, and Ronnie, you spent time on Capitol Hill. In the meantime, there's going to be a lot of horse trading and bartering and all this. And what we have now might not look like what we get a few months down the road. And that concerns me, because the way it is positioned right now, I think could be really good.
Well, I agree with you. And look, who knows where we end up? We may not end up with anything in a few months. As polarized as our country is, and as polarized as our House and Senate are, I'm not confident we'll get anything. I'm hopeful, but I'm not super confident that we get anything that. And even if we get, look, something is better, an improvement. Let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So let's try to get something.
I'm hopeful because I look at the names on it. Ted Cruz, Texan, Republican. We've got Chris Coons, senator out of Delaware, Eric Schmidt, senator out of Missouri, and then Maria Cantwell, senator out of Washington. She was, by the way, a driving force of this. She was very involved with this. Yeah. So she and Cruz are the two big ones. She's Democrat, Cruz Republican. And as we mentioned earlier, the fact that they are from different parties, they've reached across the aisle to try to get this thing crafted. I think it says a lot. I don't want to have my heart broken, because this could fix a lot of problems. But I think it speaks volumes, though, and I've said this all along, and I'm certain you agree, and this will tie into my next point. I've said all along there are only two things going to fix college athletics. One, congressional intervention, federal government gets involved. Two, collective bargaining. Yep. And by the way this is written, it's not for nor against athlete employment, which I also find very encouraging. That was a problem with the SCORE Act. SCORE Act was all anti-this, anti-that. This actually is not against the NCAA, but it gives the NCAA a lot of the things it wants, except for the athlete employment. And it's very, very murky with that. It doesn't really go either way, and I think that's going to be beneficial.
I would have to agree with you. Look, I think it has the potential to be a great piece of legislation and a major improvement over what we have now.
What do we have now? I just think it speaks volumes, though, that we have to have government, the government step in to straighten this thing out because of the individual tribes, for lack of a, that are running things. Then they each have their own, again, individual goals, wants, and needs. Nobody can come together. There's nothing to unify the group. The NCAA is beholden to its constituency, right? So they don't really have any power. And that's another thing with this, Ronnie. If this, and it's mentioned here, if this becomes a law, then there will be abilities to enforce tampering and revenue share rules. This could actually make the NCAA relevant, if only for the fact that they will have subpoena power.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other thing that is, that I think gives it a chance, if you look at the personalities involved on Capitol Hill, you range from Ted Cruz, as you mentioned, to Maria Cantwell, who is quite left of Ted Cruz, to Tommy Tuberville, who is quite right of everybody. So I mean, it's a wide range of senators who support this, and I'm hopeful.
I'm hopeful too. I just hope that we don't get our little hearts broken. Subpoena power in and of itself is a pretty big deal. The NCAA hasn't had subpoena power during its entire existence. Now it will actually be able to roll up and say, you've got to give me this, you have to do this, and oh, by the way, you have to come talk to us on such and such a day. This might be what not only makes the NCAA survive, but actually relevant for the first time in at least 5 years, probably much longer.
There's no doubt, Scott. And this is, look, we're on a path right now that is unsustainable. Whether Congress steps in right now or steps in later, what's going on right now cannot sustain itself. I mean, it's almost, Charles Barkley, who obviously has is known for having a big mouth, says, "Hey, look, I've been poor, and I love Auburn, but I'm not giving a bunch of money for Auburn to be good in football and basketball. I'm not paying a bunch of players." He's like, "That's not a real good business model." And it's not. At some point, when you've got 40, 50, I mean, how high our payroll is going to go?
We're hearing 50 million right now, but I'm shocked. And remember, the House settlement was supposed to fix all this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that ain't happening. So, yeah, we'll see what actually occurs when this thing starts moving on through Congress. But right now, we're going to get ready for our visit with Chris Lowe of On3 Sports. He's going to join us on the Duncan Williams Asset Management Hotline. We're going to get his take on everything that happened at the SEC meetings down in Miramar Beach, Destin, Florida. Get his thoughts on a possibility of the college football playoff expanding and how it could impact the college football calendar from start to finish. He's Ronnie Sanders. I'm Scott Hamilton. It's Back Porch Sports, presented by Duck Club Bourbon.
From the blind to the back porch, some traditions are built to be shared. Duck Club Bourbon, real heritage, no gimmicks. Proud sponsor of Back Porch Sports.
SEC meetings have wrapped up down in Destin, Florida. A lot of news coming from the meetings this year, but nothing earth-shattering. No clarity on the college football playoff, or at least the format the SEC will ultimately support. Greg Sankey says 16. Will that be 16 when they have a vote in a few months? I don't know. But a few other interesting tidbits and some other news from around the conference. Want to catch up with a guy who knows everything going on in the SEC. Covers college football for On3. He's joining us now on the Duncan Williams Asset Management Hotline. Chris Lowe, welcome aboard. How are you?
Hey, Scott. It's good to be with you, man.
A
little bit mobile today, but it's always good to join you.
Well, mobile is better than 6 feet under, so I'll take that.
And for the record, I'm not driving, so I just want to get that out there front and center.
Oh, yeah, we want to make that clear. Chris, what was your biggest takeaway from the news we've heard come out of Destin this week?
That there's really not a consensus in that room, in the SEC room, for what people want in the playoff. Greg Sankey clearly wants 16. He's made that pretty clear now multiple times. But there are people in the league that are good with 24 teams. And I don't know that anybody's up on the table pounding for 24, but I'd say more ADs and leaders in the conference, including presidents, at this point are more comfortable with 24 than they are anything else. They all want expansion. Just about every one of them wants some type of expansion, 16 or 24. But while Sankey is dug in right now on 16, there are, I don't know, I'd say there's 16 teams in the league. Scott, I think there's 8 or 9 that would probably prefer 24 at this point.
Doesn't that kind of contradict some of the messaging, though, from the conference? Because when I think of 24, and from what we've heard from other people, it's all about access, getting other teams in, and the SEC touts itself as being so deep from top to bottom and that it should be hard to get into championships. But when you have these teams that historically are not going to have a shot at a championship saying, yeah, we want bigger fields, it looks to me just like an entry play. They just want to have a chance to get in, to say they got in. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I think it's all everybody looking out for themselves. I mean, even the Big Ten has proposed 24. Tony Petitti has said that, and said recently that they've had no discussions 16. And if it's not 24, we'll go back to 12, and that may be what happens ultimately. But I think for the Big Ten, they want to pull Fox along. I think that's pretty clear. If you go to 24 teams, you get Fox in that equation TV-wise. I think with the SEC coaches, man, we've covered the sport. all coaches want a chance to play in the playoff, and whether it truly is a playoff or an invitational. My sense is 24 in football is much more like a tournament invitational than is a playoff. It just is. And is that all bad? I know. I'm not saying it is, but I don't ever think college football was meant to be the NCAA basketball tournament. You know who was probably most transparent of all the coaches? And I've spent some time with him early this spring was Mike Elko at Texas A&M. He told me, he said, listen, we don't ever really want to become the NCAA basketball tournament. That's sort of not what college football is. It should be hard to get into the playoff. We need to make it hard. I mean, if you lose a bad game in October to a team that's, a losing team, or I'll give you a real example, okay? So in 24, Ole Miss had a really good team, best defense in the country. They lost at home, I want to say the 5th or 6th week, to Kentucky, a bad Kentucky team. It was the only game that Kentucky won that season in the SEC. Well, that game, they ended up losing to Florida too, but that game ultimately, Scott, really kept Ole Miss out of the playoff. If you've got 24, that loss doesn't mean anything. And so I think every game like that, good and bad, should be a part of your resume. And where an 8-4 team with no wins over a ranked team, but they're ranked 24th or 25th in the committee's ranking, sneaks in. Is that a playoff-worthy team? Is that a team that you or me or anybody else realistically thinks can win a national championship? No, it's just the inclusivity factor, I think, and the TV element, which I brought up earlier with Bettini and Fox. That's what this is all about.
8-4 should get you in the Citrus Bowl.
Right.
8-4 shouldn't get you in the championship, because you and I both know, Chris, that football's different than basketball. Just because you make the tournament doesn't mean you have a realistic chance of winning. The nature of the sport's just different, and that there's usually any given year, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, you know better than I do, handful of teams who are legit national championship contenders. The rest of them are just filling out the schedule, and they might win on any given Sunday or Saturday, rather, in October, but they're not going to win 4 games in a row to win a national title. There are no Cinderellas going to happen in college football. I just don't see it.
Yeah, and that's why I say that 24 is more like an invitational that you would play early in the season in basketball than it is a postseason playoff. I know people say, well, the NFL has almost half of its teams in the playoff. Well, college football is not the NFL. We've got 100-plus teams in college football. You've got, 32 in the NFL. And people say, what about the NCAA basketball tournament? I've had someone say down your way, hey, Coastal Carolina won the championship in baseball. They were in the tournament or the championship game last year. Well, that's the difference in baseball and football, to your point. Football is a 12, 13 game schedule, typically. You're not playing teams 2 and 3 and 4 times a year. Think about in baseball. You may play a team, if you catch them in the SEC tournament or on in the NCAA tournament, you could, what would you say, Scott, play a team 5, 6 times in a year in baseball? Easy, right? That's not what football is. And so I think game to game, week to week, still has to matter. I hope we don't screw it up. Here's the thing. Here's the dirty little secret that nobody's really talking about. If we get to 24, and regrettably, I think we probably will at some point, it ain't going to end there. You know that. You've been around the sport long enough. We go from 24, we go to 32. People say, no, it'll never get to 32. Think about 2013. Was that 13 years ago? Mm-hmm. Last game of the BCS championship. That was the kick 6 year, Auburn, Alabama. Just think about that game. That's one of the more epic finishes in college football history. Well, if you're 24 teams, that game always is going to mean something because it's the Iron Bowl. But Alabama didn't go to the postseason that year. And I understand that was a different format, but that's 2 teams. The next year in 14 was the first year of the playoff, so you go from 2 to 4. Imagine if you had told somebody in 14, yeah, we're going to go to 4 teams in the playoff. Well, then 12 years, we're going to be at 24. No way. There's no way this thing will ever grow to 24. Same deal with going to 32. We get to 24 with a couple years, I promise you there will start being conversation about, well, we need, it's been successful. Fox got their deal now. The TV rights are worth more. A lot of people are watching. Let's take this thing to 32. And I just don't think there's any end in sight.
Just a couple more minutes with Chris Lowe of On3. Follow him on X at CLowFB. Chris, let's say a few months from now, there's a Friday Zoom meeting. The SEC then, as a group, then decides, yeah, it's going to be 24. They send out the release. Greg Sankey has to come out and defend it. How does he defend his own reversal of a position? I know he works for the constituents, the members of the SEC, but right now he seems pretty adamant that 16 is the number, and he's been the only voice out there really screaming that, at least from that level. How does he walk it back at that point?
A couple of things. Number one, Greg really does not want to get rid of the SEC championship game, not just for nostalgic reasons, but I think that thing's worth somewhere around $110 million to the conference. And that's real money. I mean, are you going to replace that with more games in the playoff? Maybe, maybe not. That's a lot of cash. And I think that's one thing that he certainly will remind his presidents and chancellors and everybody in that room. And I think the point that Greg made that I agree with the most is if we go straight from 12 to 24 in 1 year, and remember, the Big Ten says, hey, we're not interested in 16 anymore. If it's not 24, we'll go back to 12. That's a pretty drastic jump to go from 12 to 24 in 1 year. Because, man, there's always going to be unintended consequences. And I think he sort of paints those types of scenarios to his constituents there, again, the ADs, the chancellors, the presidents. And, hey, let's just stick at 12. Let's not budge. Let's see what happens with 12. We'll do a 12 another year, another 2 years. And then, you know what? We've only had 2 years of 12, Scott. 2 years is really not a long time to assess, to me, if something's working or not. I mean, maybe the structure can be looked at, the format, how teams are picked. I still think there's got to be a better way to have a more transparent strength of schedule quotient that, if you're playing, I always try to use real examples. Let's use Texas last year. So Texas loses on the road to Ohio State by a touchdown. And what was that, week 1 or week 2? Week 2, I think. Maybe week 1. And they finished 9-3. Now they lost to a bad Florida team. You got to win your games. But, if they're playing, I don't know, Minnesota or I don't know, BC or somebody like that, a non-conference team that's not really good, or you pull a Big Ten and you don't play anybody. And Indiana didn't play anybody last year out of conference. Now, that doesn't diminish that Indiana was clearly, in my mind, the best team in the country, but it's still not the same as playing a team like Ohio State out of the conference. But so if you take Texas last year and they don't play a marquee team out of the league and they go 10-2, well, they get in the playoff. They get in at 12. And so I think these are all sort of scenarios I think will be painted. I hope we don't ever lose those types of games. I love the Oklahoma is playing at Michigan, and Michigan playing at Oklahoma, and Texas playing at Ohio State playing at Texas. Clemson, LSU. I mean, those are good. That's good for college football. That's, in my mind, sort of the fabric of the sport is playing those intersectional games on campus. I don't know about you, man. I hate the games. They're stale. It's just not the same. To me, it's not what college football is. But if you ask me, man, unless there's some type of compromise, it doesn't sound like anybody's budging. I bet we go to 27 again with 12 in the playoff. I think that's sort of where we will arrive. And that will give us this will be the third year. That will give us a fourth year. Then you got 4 years to assess what 4 years does. But I'd like to see a more laid out plan for what the committee looks at in sizing up team schedules. And you know what? If I go on the road, so Ohio State has to play at Texas this year. They returned that trip. If Ohio State goes to Texas and wins in Austin, man, that ought to count double to me. There's got to be a way. A lot of people are a lot smarter than me in math to figure out some type of I don't know what it is, some type of metric where if you win a game like that, and at the end of the season, Texas is ranked among the committee's top 10 teams or top 15s, and you won a game at their place, that to me has to count. I say double, whatever the metric is, but that's got to count a lot more than just your random win on the road against a team that's an 8-4 football team.
And Chris, just one more question, and I don't mean to keep you so long, but I think you bring up an interesting point. Could the biggest negotiating tact in this for Greg Sankey and the SEC with regards to saying, okay, we'll go to 24 if the Big Ten maybe says, okay, we'll mandate that our constituency, our members, also play a non-conference Power 4 opponent each year? Because I think that's one of the things that makes it really unequal, and that we can't look at it and gauge it correctly because of the unevenness of the schedules and what you have to play as opposed to what the Big Ten's doing.
Yeah, it's hard. If you're on that committee, it's hard to look at schedules because they're all different. And there's no like real uniformity. I mentioned Indiana. Ohio State is going out on the road playing, a tough team, a tough opponent. Michigan's doing the same thing. I think Michigan plays, Oklahoma goes to Michigan this year, if I'm not mistaken. I think that would help. The Big Ten's proposal last year, just to be transparent, was, all right, we'll do 16 for 3 years. But then there's going to be language in that contract that says we automatically go to 24 after 3 years. Well, the SEC wasn't signing up for that. I'm like, no, we'll just stay at 12. The people I talk to in the Big Ten now say, well, that ship sailed. We're not going to play 24. We're going to do 12. So you got the two behemoths, the Big Ten and the SEC, sort of butting heads. And remember, I know people say, well, how come they have all the say? Well, there was a contract signed, I don't know, a year and a half ago that says that for there to be expansion in the playoff, that both the Big Ten and the SEC have to sign off on it. And we haven't even talked about Notre Dame, the Notre Dame element here. They've got now a clause that if they're ranked in the top 12, they're automatically in. Nothing else matters. They're in. So they're probably, you talk about this league or that league holding all the chips. I don't know if anybody's got a sweeter deal than the Irish.
That's another episode. We'll have to get you on for that. He's Chris Lowe of On3 Sports. He's eastbound and down. You can find him on X at CLowFB. Chris, before I let you go, what are you working on?
Well, I still got some stories to finish up, Scott, for my spring travels. I got something coming up on Clemson and Davo in a couple of weeks. I got something coming up on Pete Gold against Ole Miss. And then Will Muschamp and his impact, which I think will be significant on that Texas program. I think Will defensively is one of the best minds in college football. He's done it at a high level at a lot of places.
Yep. We've lost Chris Lowe. That was Chris Lowe joining us on the Duncan Williams Asset Management guest line. Really interesting take as well. We'll chop it up on the other side. It's Back Porch Sports, presented by Duck Club Bourbon.
We believe Saturdays are built on family, tradition, and the stories that stick with you. Duncan Williams helps protect the legacy behind it all, today, tomorrow, and for what comes next.
Making a final lap this episode of Back Porch Sports, presented by Duck Club Bourbon. I want to thank Chris Lowe of On3 for joining us on the Duncan Williams Asset Management Hotline. And I also want to take this moment to remind you that if you want to explore the prediction markets, Kalshi is helping you get a start. All you got to do is visit Kalshi.com/blitz, and you'll get $20 to begin your journey into prediction markets. That's Kalshi.com/blitz. I like my time with Chris. I've known Chris years and years and years. We've shared many a press box together. So his perspective is valuable to me, and he's got a lot of contacts in the sport. I really appreciate the fact that he feels like a 24-team college football playoff isn't a playoff, isn't a tournament, but an invitational tournament. Because there are a lot of different ways to interpret 8-4, Ronnie. 8-4 to me, that ain't a playoff team. That's a team that goes Citrus Bowl.
Or worse. I mean, yeah, I would have to agree with you, Scott. I'm not a fan of. I'm not even sure I'm a fan of 16. I'm a fan of 12 with the right 12. I'm not a fan of the 12 that we ended up with last year, but I'm a fan of I'm a fan of the 12-team playoff, and I'm a fan of getting the best 12. Not having 12 with let's make sure this person's included and that person's included, so we can get beaten by 50 points in the playoff.
Well, it's like I told Chris, man, there are no real Cinderellas in college football. There's not. You establish yourself at the beginning of the season and you maintain it. By the end of the season, you know who you are. Everybody knows who you are. You're not going to be caught off guard by anybody because eye in the sky don't lie. Everybody gets tape. You know that. And the dynamics of just the sport itself, the inherent violent nature of the sport itself, it's a game of attrition. And it's a lot of times it's the deepest team that ends up winning it all, or the team that gets lucky and the injury gods really shine favorably upon them. If you're putting in teams just to, oh man, they need access, so they can be in the tournament and the playoff. And no, I want a team that's got a legit shot at winning the national championship.
Yeah, and look, if we're going to go to 16 and make it, if we're going to include teams that really shouldn't be in a playoff, and you're going to go to 16. I mean, and look, I get 16, I get 24 from a monetary perspective, and expanding the playoff and creating more games. But I have to say, I'm with Greg Sankey's not perfect, and none of us are. But I think 16 and keeping the SEC championship game. Look, I am not a fan of 24, and I'm certainly not a fan of getting rid of the SEC championship game. It was the first of its kind. It means a lot in the Southeastern Conference. I'm not sure how much it means in the ACC, but it means a lot in the SEC.
Well, and that's one of the things that Chris mentioned. You're looking at $100 million or more that the conference would be out of.
Yeah.
Directly, that you can directly quantify, $100 million. And an expanded playoff, a 2014 playoff, would need to come up with an additional $225, maybe $250 million for all parties involved to say it's worth it. And they would have to include specifically another 100 plus just to make up for the conference championship game money the SEC would lose out on. So I don't know if the math will ever math. I want to see it. And that's what Greg Sankey's saying. He wants to see it as well. But think of this, and this is circular here. 2014 playoff gets rid of the conference championship game. Season presumably moves up to week 0, starts before Labor Day. That's something the American Football Coaches Association has already said that they want to see. Okay, you get rid of the conference championship games. You're playing playoff games on the first couple of weekends in December. What do we usually have the first couple of weekends in December or end of November? We have Army-Navy, and we have the Heisman Trophy. And Army-Navy is protected now by executive order. So it's going to have a standalone window, and the AFCA has even said they're cool with that. They just want the flexibility to have playoff games there. Heisman Trophy doesn't have that. It's not a game, it's a ceremony, and I get it. But let's speculate that the finalists are all playing that weekend. Wouldn't it be a bummer if those guys can't go to the ceremony? And I know there are times when the winner isn't there. I think about Barry Sanders in 1989. They were in Tokyo because Oklahoma State, I believe, was playing Texas Tech. But because of the time change, he was able to be on the telecast digitally. He was via satellite back in the day.
Right.
What would happen if they had to have somebody else come up, like at the Academy Awards? Ronnie Sanders couldn't make it to accept his Heisman Trophy on his behalf as so-and-so. That ain't the same, man. That's the most iconic individual award in sports. You do not miss the banquet. You do not miss the banquet. I'm in the presentation. I'm really concerned about this, and I don't think it's given enough consideration.
I agree. I think they should probably change the presenting date and move it back. That would be a solution. Is it ideal? But no. But look, everything is fluid right now. Everything's changing in college athletics, and so I think the Heisman Trophy has to adapt just like everybody else.
Well, and here's something else I was going to mention to you down the final minutes of the show. Do you have it at the end of the year and you include the performances in the playoff? Or work with me now for a minute. Or do you give the playoff its own award? That's something I've literally been trying to get off the ground for 2 years. And there's been interest from the college football playoff people. I've spoken to them. The NCAA tournament has a MOP, most outstanding player. Why isn't there an award for the college football playoff, either somebody who did their best for a number of games in the playoff or perhaps the entirety of the playoff. He was a standout performer. It needs to have its own award. Maybe you call it the Joe Burrow Award, the Trevor Lawrence Award. I don't know, but I think it needs to exist.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Scott. I think that's badly needed. But also, as far as the Heisman Trophy goes, back to that, I think pushing back the date, like we discussed, would make a lot more sense than doing it the way they're doing it now. Should you wait until after the playoff and include? I think so, because look, at the end of the day, the Heisman Trophy is usually given to the best player on the best team, and so chances are that guy's going to be playing. So, and you want look, if you're giving it to the best player, you want the best player there, right?
But here's the thing, and it goes back to tradition in college football. At least as any other sport, perhaps more than any other sport, leans on its tradition. The Heisman Trophy is a regular season award. We've seen the Heisman Trophy winner perform in bowl games on New Year's Day, New Year's Eve. I think about watching Marcus Allen. I think about watching all these guys, after they won the Heisman Trophy, perform in bowl games. If you include the playoff, I think that just changes the dynamic of that drastically. And also there's something about having that award ceremony with the Christmas trees and all that at the downtown athletic club, or something that's dressed up to look like the downtown athletic club. I just don't know. And again, that's me having to adapt, to your point, with the changing times. I need to be able to retrain my thought and say, okay, the most iconic individual awards in sports used to be like this, but now it's like that, and it's still awesome. That's how I have to think.
Well, think about what we've gone. We've gone from Auburn getting screwed out of a national championship in 2004 because, and look, let's go back and we're talking about the SEC here. Let's talk about, Auburn gets screwed in 2004, which leads to, the Bowl Alliance and on and on and on. But I'm sorry, the BCS playoff. But it's been a wild ride, man. It's been a wild ride, and it's going to continue to be a wild ride in college athletics and college football in particular.
Well, maybe this bill could help get some regularity to it, or some normalness to it. That's it for this edition of Back Porch Sports presented by Duck Club Bourbon. Once again, I want to thank Chris Lowe of On3 for joining us on the Duncan Williams Asset Management Hotline. Hey, don't forget to check out our podcast. You can get it anywhere you can get a podcast. YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Hit us up on there. Leave a comment, like, subscribe, whatever. Also, hit me up on social media at Scott H Sports on X. The DMs are open. If there's a topic you'd like us to discuss, I'm happy to try to do it. If there's a guest you would like us to bring on, we'll do our best to facilitate it. Otherwise, he's Ronnie Sanders. I'm Scott Hamilton. Thanks for stopping by Back Porch Sports presented by Duck Club Bourbon.